Hello, everyone. Welcome to CTOCon 2023. I'm Imran Dawood, and I'll be moderating this fireside chat on effective conflict resolution in technical teams. In any workplace, conflicts are inevitable, but they don't have to be detrimental. When handled properly, conflicts can lead to greater collaboration and innovation. During our discussion today, we'll explore strategies for resolving conflicts within technical teams, including identifying and addressing underlying issues, promoting active listening and communication, and building trust and respect among team members. We have our fantastic guests here to share their experiences and insights today, who I personally admire and having followed him through various social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, you name it. And I'm very excited to finally sit down with him and get insights on today's topic. We have with us Girish Ganesan, Global Head of People at S&P Global. Girish, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you with us, and thank you again for your time today.
Thanks, Imran. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sounds good. So before we dig deep into our topic of today, Girish, how about you give us a little bit of your background, how you started in HR, some of the roles that you have held leading up to where you are now, and a little bit about the businesses that you're supporting.
Happy to do so. Hi, everybody who is listening to us through this medium. I'm the Senior Vice President of People and have the privilege and pleasure to lead people function across multiple businesses at S&P Global. And that includes S&P Global Ratings, our ESG Sustainable One business, and as well as corporate functions, including digital technology services, legal, government affairs and security, and our general risk assurance function. I joined S&P about 16 months ago, so fairly new to the organization, given the amount of institutional knowledge that exists and the wealth of tenure that exists amongst our people at S&P. But it's been an absolutely incredible experience, and I couldn't have chosen a better organization to join that aligns with my own personal values and what S&P believes in, which is really about powering the world markets. I've been in human resources all throughout my journey. I graduated with a political science and economics degree. I thought I would become a lawyer. I think if my parents had a choice, I would have been either a lawyer, engineer, or doctor. Which, if you're a South Asian, you can probably relate to that. Many of our parents aspire for that for their kids. But I chose the profession of human resources. It wasn't planned. It happened by accident. But it essentially allowed me a combination of two aspects. One, to get closer to human connectivity, and just people focus. And I consider myself to be a relationship builder. So the profession came very naturally to me. But also, there was a huge opportunity that I saw based on everything that my mentors had told me, that this will be one of the professions that will become one of the most important professions at some point in the corporate world. And post-pandemic particularly, I find that people don't want to have any conversations without their HR people. So I'm glad that I chose this profession. I've grown up in various countries. I've lived in various countries. So I consider myself to be a global citizen that has just allowed me to experience different cultures, different geographies, and just made me who I am as an individual and as a professional today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the detailed introduction, Girish. So diving into today's topic, and starting off with my first question, what role does active listening play in resolving conflicts in the workplace? And how can individuals and managers improve their listening skills to support conflict resolution?
It's a great question, Imran. It starts with the ability to listen and hear what another person is saying is essential to any healthy relationship, including the way we work. To me, that's just a basic human principle, and that's what it starts with. It is critical to pay attention to the other person when they're talking, focus on the words as stated in order to really comprehend what is being said, and pay attention to the points being made instead of mentally preparing your response. Because oftentimes when we are talking to individuals, We are preparing ourselves mentally on how am I going to, respond to this conversation or this engagement versus actively listening and paying attention to what the person is saying. And then you use honest conversations to learn additional facts and details about the situation. Listen for signs of emotions and feelings that may be involved. And to successfully resolve conflicts, you'll often need to read both verbal and nonverbal communication cues. And it's the nonverbal communication cues that we often miss because
Yeah.
we are, active listening tends to be also about what the person is saying, but it's not always about what the person is saying. Body language, how the person is emoting through nonverbal cues is equally important. And that allows you to remain calm and in control of your emotions and work to understand the position of the conflicting parties in particular. So it comes down to, as I said, some basic human principles that apply to any relationship, including the way we work.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it comes down to the basic principles, and that's the bottom line. Great. So, building on it, research has shown that a lack of transparency and open communication can contribute to the development of hidden or unresolved conflicts in the workplace. With this in mind, how can organizations promote a culture of transparency and open communication that supports effective conflict resolution and reduces the risk of such conflicts?
Another great question. Firstly, at the highest level, it starts with making sure everybody understands what the organizational culture and values are, because that's what binds all of us together. And every organization thrives for transparency and open communication, right? No organization necessarily sets itself up on not having those attributes within their culture. But many organizations often fail to have that culture because they are not able to bind all of their people towards a common set of values and making sure those set of values are embedded in everything that the organization does. And when it comes to particularly culture of transparency and open communication, I'll state two things to remain short because I'm sure you have other questions for me.
Mhm.
First, I would say is invite honest feedback. It is so essential to have a mechanism that employs to provide feedback and on organizational culture, practices, norms, behaviors, and formal anonymous mechanisms allow employees to highlight sensitive matters that may be hidden otherwise and may not emerge. And most importantly, it will help in increasing your trust in the employees. And many organizations successfully do that. That's why we have employee engagement surveys that happen
Mhm.
across many organizations.
Mhm.
Similarly, outside formal mechanisms, enabling employees to ask questions is the best way to drive transparency. Many companies successfully do open mic or open Q&A channels where anyone in the organization can ask questions or raise concerns,
Mhm.
encouraging employees to share their voice and bottom-up feedback. And that can happen at the highest level of the organization. That can also happen through various layers of the organization so that that culture of transparency permeates through all organizational layers. And it's not just, a tone from the top, but tone from every layer of leadership. The second piece is ensuring consistent communication.
Mhm.
Trust is fundamental to transparent work culture, as I just stated, but consistent communication is a key enabler.
Yeah.
Fostering a trustworthy communication system within your regular operations to keep every employee on the same page related to big announcements in the organization, any
Mhm.
updates that are related to organizational change, and providing a mechanism so it permeates through the entire organization deeper across various layers of leadership. Because if the employees are not informed as to what the organization is up to, that also results in conflict and lack of trust in the organizational leadership and in the organization itself. And apart from having a solid communication platform, basics of ways of working are very key. And this is
Mhm.
what gets underestimated. Frequent team level meetings across the company. These meetings will sufficiently work as the perfect opportunity to address concerns and issues and even help everybody at the team level to be on the same page because they'll be interacting more regularly. And like I said, many leaders underestimate how important it is to check in with their employees on a regular basis and their teams. And I would say this is even more important in a hybrid environment when we know some of our workforce is remote and some might be in person.
Perfect. So, building on that, you mentioned conflicts within the team, but you know that conflicts can often involve multiple parties or cross-functional teams, making it more complex to manage it. In light of this, what are some of the best practices for managing conflicts that involve multiple parties or cross-functional teams?
Yeah, I'll start with a sentiment that I fundamentally believe in. So my view is cross-functional teams are the way of the future. Although it takes some getting used to, cross-functional teams have the ability to do the most good. They come with their challenges, right? And like you talked about, including managing conflict. And a lot of cross-functional teams uh, that are not successful, it's because of communication problems and they suffer from poor management that prevents them from reaching their fullest potential. If you're supposed to be a rock star leader of a cross-functional team, I would say there are a few things you want to do in order to be successful. Firstly, staying on the theme of communication, I would say facilitating communication. Cross-functional team members have a lot on their plate. They're often dealing with a variety of tasks, priorities that usually keep them busy. And your team needs to have time to talk to each other, both with each other and with you as the leader. So making sure there's enough time that is set aside in forums where that communication is taking place. And if your cross-functional team partially is comprised of remote workers, and scheduling conflicts are making it virtually impossible to get everybody on the same page, making sure you're providing alternative communication tools. Group chat apps are excellent for that purpose, as an example, internal social media networks. But again, it comes down to facilitating communication so that people are talking to each other and not just focused on task and being transactional. The other aspect is recognizing team members also as individuals. Since cross-functional teams have a lot to address, it can be difficult to address them all under the same umbrella sometimes. While there are certain things that will apply to the entirety of the group, some things will need to be addressed on an individual basis. So don't forget to make time to check in with each team member separately. They will each have unique questions and concerns that they will want you to address with them. And although it may be hard to accommodate them all, but sometimes it's more about them deserving undivided attention versus necessarily addressing their concerns and issues.
Yeah.
The other aspect I would say is rebounding from arguments. And what I mean by that is, your cross-functional team is going to disagree. There are going to be deadlocks. There's going to be experience conflict. They're going to oppose each other. That's the whole diversity of thought that comes with cross-functional team. And that's the reality of the matter. While it may sound grim, this is exactly what you want. If these conflicts don't occasionally happen, you might even want to hire some disruptors to keep the ideas circulating, because innovation is born from opposing minds, right? Coming together to solve a common problem. And that's why, someone very wise once said to me very early in my career, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Because diversity of thought fuels when you're all working towards a common problem versus you having a preconceived notion of this is what the solution needs to be. And establish, some rules of engagement that there are no bad ideas and every team member is equally important. The last bit I would say is, as you can see, I'm very passionate about cross-functional teams, leaving some room to move. Your cross-functional team might come up with some pretty off-the-wall stuff. And that's great. It's a sign that things are working and you should invite change and innovation. And don't throw the book at them when they begin to deviate. Understand the merits of what they're doing. Be flexible and try your best to accommodate and encourage, that diversity of thought amongst a cross-functional team.
Amazing feedback. Thank you so much, Girish. Those were some amazing best practices that I think, if we start including those, some of them even, like, for example, just, talking to the individual, like, with the undivided attention, it has done wonders for me, in when I faced issues with cross-functional teams. Great. So, building on that, workplace conflicts can also involve issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this context, how can organizations effectively manage and resolve conflicts that involve such issues and promote a more inclusive workplace culture?
Another great question, Imran. It starts with never assume. Often, we are drawing conclusion around a conflict, including issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we assume. And a lot of those assumptions come from our own unconscious biases, right? Because either we personalize things and because we feel like we understand the other person's situation, even if it is relatable, but not having a complete story because we haven't necessarily spoken to them about what the concern or the issue is, or the unconscious bias kicks in because of our upbringing, our education, our professional interaction. Again, not giving a chance in hearing out the other party to really understand what the issue or concern is, so we can actively resolve the conflict. So never assume, and it goes back to again the human principle of listen, engage in a conversation to really understand what the issue is. But then, if you feel like you're still hitting a wall and not able to resolve the conflict, involve an expert.
Mhm.
That's why we have diversity specialists in many organizations. They have experience in this space. Reach out to them and understand what you might be doing wrong, or how the situation may not have been handled, and what can be done differently. And sometimes, speaking to a neutral party helps resolve sensitive matters, particularly as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because then it feels like there isn't necessarily you're not leading it on the basis of your own unconscious bias, and you're open to someone else intervening to help resolve the conflict itself.
Great. So, my last question for today, and this is my personal favorite because when as your team gets bigger and bigger, and you are in that growth mode, especially working within a startup, I definitely can use some personal tips on this one as well. So, diving right into it, resource allocation. Workloads and project priorities can sometimes be sources of conflict in the workplace. How can organizations effectively manage and resolve conflicts that involve such issues while maintaining a positive and productive work environment?
A great question. I can relate to this as well because I think we all grapple with this pretty much day in and day out. It takes there's a famous metaphor. It takes two to tango. So
Mhm.
it takes leadership to effectively manage and resolve such conflicts, but it also takes team member contribution to help resolve the conflict. Because at the end of
Mhm.
the day, some of these project priorities, capacity issues, the team members are closer to it than a leader might be.
Mhm.
Um, so from a leadership perspective, I would say just making sure that you set goals and set priorities and are very clear on accountabilities and success measures, so that no team member feels they're not clear on what their focus is and what their contribution is. And be willing to revisit those priorities throughout the years, because things change over a span of 12 months. So that's what regular check-ins are meant for. And revisiting what might need to stop because either there are resource constraints, and willing to stand up for your team with leadership as to where things might need to pivot. From a team member perspective, actively raising issues but also coming up with a solution. I often ask my team members when they raise an issue, if you were in my seat, how would you solve it? Because you're the best judge sometimes more than myself. And I want to work with you on what the solution needs to be because I don't have answers to all of the questions. So,
Mhm.
encouraging team members to have a voice and empowering them to come up with a solution definitely, would result in more positivity and productivity. And also empowering the team members to shift priorities where they need to, and cutting them some slack on, where deadlines could be extended, because a lot of times we work in organizational pressure that certain things have to be delivered in a certain time frame, but ensuring there's some buffer that is built in so that we're not stressing our team members so much that they have no room to maneuver within the priorities that have been set. The last thing, and this has come back full circle with the first question that you asked me, Imran, listen.
Mhm.
Team members listen to the leaders so that they understand what the expectations are. Leaders listen to the team members so that they're clear on where the issues and concern are. Comes back to that human principle of a healthy relationship.
Great. Girish, so much food for thought in just, a quick session. And I hope that, the audiences share the sentiment along with me. I wish we had more time to include the audience to get some questions from the audience, but I know you're pressed for time. Girish, this was last minute request. Thank you so much for accommodating. It was an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here. And thank you very much for your time today. So good luck and thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I think this is a very important topic that we all grapple with. And before I sign off, from me and my family, Ramadan Mubarak to anybody who's celebrating that across the world.
Thank you very much, sir.